Well, here we are, folks. Let's go ahead and I'm going to try to make this a tight video here, but it's interesting to think about. Of course, this title kind of goes back to Tony Montana and his version of Scarface, or at least Al Pacino's version of Scarface, wherein he said, "They need people like me. They need people like me to point their fucking fingers. Say that's the bad guy. They need white people. They need white people to point their fucking fingers and say that's the bad guy." It's absolutely true. They need us. You think about people like James Baldwin, for example. Said, the Statue of Liberty means nothing. Racism, racism, racism. Where does he live for most of his life? France. Lives most of his life in France. Lives most of his life in France. Is hugely white supremacist bastion. Why? Probably because he didn't want to go back to one of the liberated African nations. Sorry about that. My cat keeps getting in my trash can. Anyway, go ahead and finish this up here. He didn't want to go back. There's a lot of reasons why, of course. Mostly because he was gay. Of course, some countries, there's a false impression, I think, that exists. And of course, I think that still exists in some African nations. Of course, you could say that's a legacy of white supremacy because of religion. But homosexuality is not treated the same way. And there's a lot of deflection and defense of homosexuality because, well, it was something that the ancients did, so it was okay. Only amongst certain castes, yes. Yeah, like warrior class, of course. Yeah, that's what happened. But did ordinary people engage in that? That's a whole different issue. The elites, of course, engaged in it. And dare I use that term elites loosely, but yeah, the Greeks, particularly the warrior caste did that. It's the same type of thing that goes on, that happens. This is the whole foundation of homo-fascism and all that business. But you think about that. African diaspora in the world today, with enough money and enough gusto and enough, dare I use the term chutzpah, they can go to any African nation and start a business and make it work. And being able to be free from the white man and not having to deal with white supremacy, but they don't. Some of that has to do with, the way it's presented in the news, mainstream media. Oh, African migrants are coming to Europe or whatever the case may be. And this is kind of like a couple of videos I watched, but it's like they made do. Even people like Tariq Nasheed went to countries like Zimbabwe. And yet they returned to the United States with all these suspected white supremacists because they need the enemy. They need that enemy to exist. They go back to, it's kind of funny. I was watching one of these videos, and obviously from a gal that must get some money on the side for her videos, but she was talking to this one intellectual, and it's very funny the way he put it. But of course, all the racial issues that were going on in the UK. And he said, ultimately, well, yeah, you can just go back to Africa. I think that would be the better message. This is what Marcus Garvey wanted. This is what, of course, it was done long before, freedom and everything else. But I think this is the true answer. The thing is, they need people like you. They need white folks, if nothing else, to say, you are the bad guy. You are the one that has caused all the evil in the world. And once you go, then it'll be somebody else. It'll be another group. Be the Hispanics next, or it'll be whoever next. So this idea that always it's fascism that creates this idea of the enemy and this and that. Everybody uses it. Every political ideology uses it to some degree. Robert Mugabe loved, as much as base as he was about his quotes about women, this and that, but pretty much every other country is based about women besides the United States and about their treatment of women. But he needed to blame the white farmers and to say, yeah, we're going to give land back to the ordinary Zimbabwean. Of course, things went back and forth. He kicked out a lot of them. He drug his feet on that. And then some of them came back. Went back and forth. But it's a very different thing to think about. Isn't it? It's a very interesting idea. This idea of Black Lives Matter and all this type of thing. Well, if you went to Africa, they probably wouldn't, if you went to Zimbabwe or if you went to, Namibia or Zambia or Malawi or whichever country, you'd be free to live how you wanted to. You wouldn't have any pesky honky to bother you. Maybe the Chinese. And, it's a matter of opinion about how much the Chinese really own various countries like Malawi. Well, Malawi I don't think does. But, countries like Botswana, for example. Or Zimbabwe as well. But there's debate about how much control they really have. You can go back and be closer to your own people. But of course, ultimately, these folks aren't going to push that because obviously, who is the real racist? Who is the real racist? Who is the real one that wants evil? The people that want to say, oh, we can all get along in a multiracial society? Or the ones that say, if you want to go back to Africa, or if you want to go back to India, do that. Go ahead. Deep down, there's an idea of me. Yeah, it's like we, white folks in America. Yeah, some wish that, they LARP about going back to Europe or whatever the case may be. But Europe nowadays is so complicated. And we probably wouldn't be wanted. I don't know. It's just me thinking. As I've said before, these videos are more like diaries. They're not necessarily truth-filled or this and that. I do try to use some facts when I feel the need to, but overall, yeah. But it's interesting the way these things work and the way migration is going to be changing. And I think the narratives are going to change, and there's going to be a large, massive pushback. I think once these African nations do become stronger, the need for African diaspora to return will increase. I really do. But I think they still, you still don't see Jay-Z living in, in luxury in a country like Malawi or, I keep using Malawi, but, or South Africa or whichever. You don't see them do that, do you? They still continue to come to America. Now, of course, like I say, I'm going super weak now. I know. But it's interesting to think about, isn't it? white people are the problem, this and that, and yet they still come to America. They still come to Canada. They still come to various European nations. Yes. And of course, I will acknowledge this. Yes. America, or, the United States military, the State Department, the CIA, and all those other ones, they disrupted South America. Of course. They disrupted African nations. Of course. I have no doubt about that. I have no doubt whatsoever. The same thing that you can say about, Syria or whatever the case may be. And I'll say, yes, absolutely. But it takes, it takes more than one person to be involved with a conspiracy. So this idea of Black Lives Matter, this and that, is simply just more of a push to be against the idea of people going back home to their true homes. It's interesting to think about, nonetheless. You have to question that. They need the idea of white supremacy to defend their ideas. They need the police to do bad things so that they can defend their real motives. What that motive is, I think it's slavery of the whole world. They already have it now, but they don't want to give people the glimmer of hope that if African diaspora can return back to Africa and live more of a peaceful life, whatever country that may be, as it works out, that they won't be able to. Because they're trapped in this land. You always have to question people's motives when they go on and on about white supremacy this, white supremacy that. Like I say, I think Jay-Z, Beyonce, I think they live in a Caribbean nation, I think. Where do they live? Let me see here. Where does Jay-Z live? I'm curious now. Yep, there we go. Oh, he lives in Bridgehampton. Oh, really? Bridgehampton, New York. The whole family is renting the very private home to spend the summer to enjoy some quiet time by the beach. They have a house in Los Angeles, Bel Air neighborhood. Yeah. Mortgage of $250,000 on their new Los Angeles home. $88 million. Wow. Their real estate empire. I'm curious. I'm going to let you guys listen in, because I know that you're fascinated by this, I'm sure. Bed-Stuy. Oh, it's one of these types of things, huh? Okay. Tween Bay. Brooklyn stash spot, huh? State Street in Brooklyn. Tribeca, yeah. Time Warner Center, wherever the hell that is. Miami. Mardi Gras. I got a place in Louisiana. Sutton Place condo. I had the feeling that they saw Wayne Scott, Malibu, Bel Air. I was under the mistaken idea that they lived in Caribbean of some sort. And of course, it's very interesting. These folks will give money as much as they can to the African diaspora, and yet maybe they feel the same way that I do. That they, regardless of how white supremacy has treated them, or how racist the system is and everything, but they're still American at their core. Maybe this is the whole thing of what people like Huey Newton felt like. Now, I read Huey Newton's widow's book. I didn't read his autobiography, but I did read his widow's book. And that book talked about, of course, when Huey Newton left the United States after COINTELPRO and the mistakes that happened in the Black Panthers. He went to China. He went to China first, spent some time, and they were he went to Cuba first. Excuse me. Other way around. Went to Cuba first, very laid back, very, calm environment for the most part. Just kind of, it gets done when it gets done. Whereas you went to China, it was much more 15-minute break. Hey, zoba, let's get back to work, So it was much more tight in. I think that's, obviously a difference of cultures, this and that, but ultimately he came back to the United States. I don't know. It's interesting to think about nonetheless. Of what the future will hold. It's interesting to think about also the ideas that how much are we products of our culture? How much are we products of our environment? Or whatever culture we were forced to live under. Much as they hate white supremacy, they profit from it. They say that every white person profits from white supremacy. And I'll say, you profit from it too. Black man. People like Jay-Z. This guy has how many houses? We're looking through the list here. He can say what he wants to, and supposedly all this can be taken away from him. The Brooklyn Stash Spot, and the Tribeca pad, and Ty Warner Center house, and all this other stuff. It can be taken away. It can be taken away from him because of whatever reason, but it has to be put into perspective. With that, folks, I think I've said my piece on that issue. Just made me think about it, watching some of these videos where African Americans move back to the African diaspora, whether it's Sierra Leone or whether it's, like I said, Gambia or Namibia or wherever. And some stay and some don't. Become an issue more and more. Once this country eventually breaks apart, whether it's peacefully or whether it's violently, that's going to be an option for a lot of rich African Americans who live in this country, Black folks that live in this country. The idea of going to Africa and starting anew probably look good. Unfortunately, of course, there'll be plenty of Americans, plenty of white honkies who will go to Asia and continue to be sex pests and sex pads. So for that, I apologize to Asia. You know what? I'm going to say that right now. I apologize to Asia. I apologize to China. I apologize to Vietnam. I apologize especially to Thailand. I apologize to every Asian nation I cannot think of off the top of my head, including India. I apologize for white people that go overseas because they are horny ass motherfuckers and they cannot keep it in their pants, and they want to they live in this equally cringe idea that they need some subservient waifu type of person. It is disgusting. Even I have to say that's something that is misplaced to say that, oh, well, that's white supremacy. I don't believe that. I do not believe that. I believe that is simply the idea of control, and it comes from weak men. It comes from weak men who grew up being nerds. Dare I use this? I'm just going to go off. It comes from nerds, and it comes from people that worked in technology who were the losers, and they didn't want to deal with white women, so they decided to come to Asia. They come to China, wherever the case may be, and they say, "Hey, I need me a waifu. I got all this money. I'm going to go here." That's why I don't trust expats. That's why I don't trust expats in general, especially American expats who go to other countries. You see these folks do videos on China, all this type of thing, and they're just slobbing on that knob. And I said to myself, Biggin, you're never going to be Chinese. I'm still talking about it. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it. Nathan Rich, you're never going to be Chinese. Serpent Zade, even though you're from South Africa, British South Africa, you're never going to be Chinese. And you know that. Even though you've got a Hapa kid now. Lao Y86, you're not going to be Chinese. But they know that, though. But they instead produce all these videos saying how ooh and ah China is, and some people, are, I guess, what they call Wu Mao. I don't know what that means specifically, but it just sounds like basically slobbing on the knob. Or they're people that are just, they talk shit about China every turn. People like, Serpent Zede, who does sound somewhat combative. Sounds like someone who likes to start shit. Or people like Lao Y86, who are spoiled American brats. And for that, once again, I apologize to Asian nations for spoiled American brats and for spoiled white people. I apologize for that. It's shameful. It is. But these folks always exist. I'm sure there were plenty of sexpats who existed in the 1950s, I'm sure, who lived in Thailand or whatever the case may be, and they had, a secret family or whatever the case may be. Even people like Anthony Wong, famous Hong Kong actor. His dad was Australian, and he met his brothers, this and that, but turns out the dad was a scumbag. Never gave the mother any money, this and that. Anthony Wong grew up tough. Luckily, he eventually joined the Shaw Brothers, the TVB studio actors studio, the training actors, and eventually became the world-class actor that he is today. But nonetheless, it's a very scummy thing. That's why I feel sorry for mixed kids, because they're never going to fit into one society or the other. They're never going to be seen as one of them. And that can be advantageous, and that can create more creative people, but I think it could also create more angry people. Create people that are trapped in between two worlds. That they can never be seen as equal in either one. Is there anything else I should say? I'm trying to think about it, but yeah, they who's the real racist? I'm going to bring it back to this point. Who is the real racist? The person who thinks that as many Africans should live in their own nations and build that wealth? Or the folks who say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, we need to support, people, we need more integration. We need more of that. And dare I use the phrase by Mosley, but, people making humanity as gray as themselves. And it's true. You're making people as gray as themselves, the image that they want. Making people all mixed together where that everybody's the same. I don't want that. Just because I don't understand that I may hold some prejudiced views or whatever, I can still respect Chinese culture. Apart from, the obviously very flashy and Chinese opera inspired kung fu movies, which have been going on since, before even before the United States is big film studios, this and that. Or whether it's African countries, the same way. They don't all have to be the same. And they never will be anyway. They're going to hold on to some aspects and get rid of others. I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have said my piece. Like I say, I hold no hate in my heart for anybody in particular. But you must question. I'm not going to, once again, I know what people could say about this, and I'm not going to say redacted. But who are the ones that are really holding you back? Is it the white yuppie couple that lives in, a nice suburb? Or is it the folks that are talking about Black Lives Matter and saying that they need to get rid of police? And this idea that we're going to make integration right this time. You have to think about who's the true enemy. The person that's talking about peace, the person that talks about separatism, or more possibly a war. Who is the real person that is holding you back? The real person that is pulling your strings? It's a thought. May not be a good thought, but nonetheless. I know this isn't groundbreaking, I don't think. This is something that I think a lot of people have said. But I'm simply verbalizing it myself, and maybe you can just see what you think about it. So I'll keep it there, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all have a good day. I may upload another video. I may not. Who knows? It's all a mystery. Time is an illusion. With that, I bid you adieu. Adieu.